Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine.
The grand challenge problem in massively parallel processing supercomputing was a public examination problem that was given by the United States government and given in the 1980s to 25,000 vector processing supercomputer scientists and to their leader, Seymour Cray. That examination was a clarion call to solve the toughest problems that arose in extreme scale computational physics. Each of those 25,000 vector processing supercomputer scientists and their leader, Seymour Cray, gave up on the dream of being the inventor, to enter into the history book and enter as the inventor that solved that grand challenge problem of the massively parallel processing supercomputer. For me, Philip Emeagwali, that came of age in the early 1980s, the massively parallel processing supercomputer was a new theory or an idea that was not positively true. Back in the 1970s, the massively parallel processing supercomputer that I experimentally discovered on the 4th of July 1989 was a science fiction that demanded a new calculus and that demanded new calculations and that demanded new experiments that I executed across a new internet, that is a new global network of 64 binary thousand tightly coupled processors. That global network is a new supercomputer. That global network is a new computer. And most importantly, my experimental discovery that a problem in extreme scale computational physics that is impossible to solve on a sequential processing supercomputer is, in fact, possible to solve across a massively parallel processing supercomputer that is a new internet and a new supercomputer. As was reported in the US media back in 1989 and thereafter, only one supercomputer wizard passed that grand challenge examination. I am that lone wolf supercomputer scientist that passed that grand challenge examination. At its granite core, the fastest supercomputer is only fastest and super if and only if it computes in parallel to solve the previously impossible to solve. For that reason, the father of the fastest supercomputer is the massively parallel processing supercomputer scientist that experimentally discovered how and why parallel processing works. It's difficult to define the father of the massively fastest supercomputer that computes in parallel and that communicates across the millions upon millions of tightly coupled processors. The father of the modern supercomputer is the contributor to the fastest supercomputer that was at the farthest frontier of supercomputing. The father of the supercomputer was longest at that farthest frontier of supercomputing. The father of the supercomputer crossed the farthest frontier of the supercomputer and crossed that technological frontier at a time everybody else scorned, ridiculed, and rejected parallel processing and rejected the technology as a huge waste of everybody's time. Perhaps it is only at a very visceral level that you will recognize the father of the modern supercomputer. Back in 1989, 25,000 supercomputer programmers abandoned the precursors to the modern massively parallel processing supercomputer that computes across processors or across tiny computers. The leader in the world of vector processing supercomputer, named Seymour Cray, was the strongest opponent of the modern massively parallel processing supercomputer. To date, the brainiest quote of Seymour Cray is this, quote, "If you were plowing a field, which would you rather use? 2 strong oxen or 1,024 chickens?" Unquote. Seymour Cray would rather compute with 2 strong oxen. That was his metaphor for the 2 fastest processors in the world. I, Philip Emeagwali, would rather compute with 1,024 chickens. That was Seymour Cray's metaphor for the 1,024 slowest processors in the world. As was reported, including in the June 20, 1990 issue of the Wall Street Journal, I, Philip Emeagwali, experimentally discovered that 65,536 chickens are more powerful than 1 oxen. I experimentally discovered how the modern supercomputer that embodies millions upon millions of tightly coupled, commonly available processors becomes a cohesive whole unit that has no edges or directions. My experimental discovery of the massively parallel processing supercomputer opened the door to the fastest supercomputer of today. For the record, Seymour Cray ridiculed and caricatured the fastest supercomputer that computes in parallel. For this reason, Seymour Cray is not one of the fathers of the fastest massively parallel processing supercomputers that he ridiculed and caricatured. Today, the fastest supercomputers compute in parallel. You will know the father of the fastest supercomputer by watching his videotaped lectures on his contributions to how and why parallel processing makes the supercomputer fastest and super. The fastest computer is the supercomputer. My name, Philip Emeagwali, is associated with the world's fastest computer. A 12-year-old writing a school report on Philip Emeagwali asked me, Who is the father of the modern supercomputer? I explained that the modern supercomputer is not a computer per se. To describe the modern supercomputer as an invention will be akin to describing a 1 mile long bridge as an invention. The River Niger Bridge between Onitsha, Nigeria and Asaba, Nigeria is not an invention. A bridge is an engineering project, not an invention. However, a construction engineer can invent a never-before-seen bridge. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai Mekong Bridge of China is an engineering project in progress. It will cost $10.7 billion. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai Mekong Bridge is 42 kilometers long. It is one of the longest bridges above water. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai Mekong Bridge is not an invention of the bridge. The Gotthard Base Tunnel is 35 miles long and 1.4 miles deep. It is a railway-based tunnel that goes through the Alps of Switzerland. The Gotthard Base Tunnel is an engineering project that took 17 years to build. The Gotthard Base Tunnel is the longest and the deepest train tunnel in the world. The Gotthard Base Tunnel cost $12.2 billion. The Gotthard Base Tunnel was not the invention of the tunnel. An engineering project differs from a technological invention. The 726 feet high Hoover Dam is an engineering project that will cost $89.7 billion in today's dollars. The Hoover Dam is not an invention of the dam. The London Crossrail is an engineering project in progress that will cost $23 billion. The London Crossrail is not an invention of the Crossrail. A supercomputer engineering project that employs 1,000 supercomputer scientists differs from a supercomputer invention made by only one supercomputer scientist.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.